Okay, developers, welcome back to this Getting Started with CDK. So in this video, we're going to set up and deploy a new project using AWS CDK. We're going to create a simple Lambda function just to see how it all works and fits together. We're then going to give this Lambda function a function URL, which allows us to make a request to an endpoint, trigger this Lambda, and then get the data back from it. So let's jump in. Okay, we're going to start with the blank template, which you can get on the link below. We've already called this simple Lambda, and we already have our files set up and ready to go. First thing we're going to do is run npm i just to make sure that our packages are installed. And then we're going to start off with probably the easiest part, which is going to be creating the Lambda function. So we're going to head over to our source folder inside Lambdas and create a new file called simple lambda.js. In here, we're going to create our handler, give me an async function. We're going to create a simple response. It's going to have the status code of 200, and the body is just going to be a simple JSON stringify with a message, hello from Lambda. Very creative, but you get the point. And then we're just going to return this response. Lambdas typically come with an event and context, so we can save that for later. And that's our first Hello World Lambda ready to go. But now we have to hook it up so that CDK knows how to deploy our Lambda. To do that, we're going to head over to our construct folder. I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call this simple lambda stack.js. I'm going to create our class and call it simple lambda stack. And that's going to extend stack, which comes from CDK. We're going to have our constructor. It's going to take a scope, ID, and props. And then we're going to call super with the same parameters. From here, we're going to create a simple lambda variable. That's going to be a new function. It's going to take this, and then we're going to name it simple lambda function. So now let's import some of these to make sure that everything's working correctly. So we've got our stack that comes from CDK lib function. I'm going to import that from AWS Lambda on CDK lib, and that will give us access to the autocomplete. So we need runtime on our Lambda, and we're going to use runtime, which comes from CDK Lambda as well. We're going to use node 18, and then we're going to define where the actual code lives. So this is simple lambda.handler, and that will be the name of the Lambda file and then the handler that we exported. But we also have to define where that file actually lives in our code base. So we import code from AWS Lambda, from asset, and then we grab all of our lambdas from source lambdas. So source lambdas. So now we have set up our Lambda configuration. We need to give it a function URL. This allows us to have a predetermined URL that AWS configures for us, and then we can just call this Lambda from the outside world. So we're going to do new function URL. It's going to take in this. I'm going to call it simple lambda function URL. As you can tell, I'm amazing at naming things. The function that we need to attach this URL to is going to be the simple lambda variable that we created. Then to make sure that we can call this from the outside world, we're just going to remove the authorization. So that's function URL auth type, and then we're going to have none, just for this demonstration. And then we're going to export this class, simple lambda stack. And that is everything we need for our Lambda stack. So now we have to go and put everything together in our main.js file. So over in CDK and then main, we're going to import CDK. We actually need the lib version. There we go. I'm going to create a new app. So const app, and that's going to be a new cdk.app. Fingers are a bit cold today. We need to create a new instance of our simple lambda stack class. So we just created this class and we need to bring it into our main.js file. So we're going to run new simple Lambda stack, and then you can see it's already importing from constructs, simple Lambda stack. I'm going to pass in the app as the scope. The ID, we're going to call it simple Lambda stack, and let's give it like a generic sort of ID so we can easily find it in the console. And then props, there's no props. Okay, so if everything is working correctly, we can run CDK deploy --all. Also, you should have your IAM username in your CDK JSON configuration if you follow the instructions to get this template. So it will deploy with that new username. Mine is going to use my default. You'll typically be asked if you want to deploy these changes. I'm going to hit yes. Okay, so once that's done, it's usually pretty painful. It takes about a minute even with this simple stack. We literally have one Lambda and it takes about 58 seconds. I have certain projects that have a lot more and they take about the same time. So try not to open social media or do anything unproductive while this is deploying, because the context switching is a killer. Okay, so if we head over to the AWS console, we search for Lambda, and then in our functions, we can find the Lambda we just deployed. So it's simple Lambda stack 001, simple Lambda, and then a random string. From here, you'll see that this function URL actually has a value now. If we didn't add that in the code, this would be empty. This is the URL that we can call from the outside world to access our Lambda function. So I'm going to head back to the code, and I'm using something called Thunder Client as an extension. It's just an easy way to make requests. I'm going to take that URL that we just copied, paste it in here, simple get request, click send, and there we go. Hello from Lambda. So you can see that took quite a long time to respond, about 3 or 4 seconds, which is crazy. If we run it again, it's going to be 355. That's to do with cold starts, and that's a whole topic on itself. And each request we do after that is under a second, typically under 500 milliseconds. So yeah, cold starts are definitely a thing when it comes to Lambda functions. We're going to destroy everything we just created just as good housekeeping. That means that our console doesn't get filled up with a bunch of fluff and stuff we don't need, or things that if we leave hanging around, they could actually cost us money. You go away for the weekend, you come back and you've got a $200 bill for a tutorial that is not being used. So we're going to run destroy. I'm going to click yes. And that's it. We have confirmation that our simple Lambda stack has been destroyed. Okay, so that was a quick one. You know how to deploy one of the core building blocks of serverless application development, which is Lambda functions. We're going to be adding more services and functionality to our CDK projects in the next few videos. So subscribe and come along for the journey.